Hello.
Hello.
We have Melissa and Glenn. Yay, they both have video.
Yes, and I have to adjust. You can see the one light that's to the side of it. At least there's no writing today.
Yeah, we'll have to put you up in a studio next time.
Yeah, that's what I really needed. Well, I would normally be not here, but unfortunately the time of day I have to be here. So
Yeah.
all right.
Awesome. Man, guys, welcome to the last day.
It's going to be awesome. So, and we're recording already, aren't we? Okay.
We are recording already.
We didn't get to see Rocky. I'm disappointed.
Here she is.
Okay.
Rocky.
There we go.
Here is the puppy that you hear in the last video.
Well, exactly. I was disappointed at the end of the video that we didn't get to see Rocky. Well, now we've seen Rocky. It's awesome.
Yeah. So I actually tried to tilt it, but then it would just like mess up the whole mic, and I was like, nope, you can hear her. That's great. Cool. Okay, so man, we've had a very busy week so far, and I know that it's some people haven't been able to catch up all the way, and that's totally cool, totally fine. We will be available for questions on our Gmail too, so at any point when you're at any point in the course, you can just send us questions. But we have covered the how to know what VA is right for you, what your preferences are for the VA, and what you're going to be giving them, and then what company you're going to go with. And also, we've gone over the hiring process for that VA and the interview process. And today we're talking about the onboarding process because we felt like it was something that we really needed to include, even though it wasn't initially a part of the hiring your VA. But now it seems like something that it's really important. And so we think that you're going to get a lot from the onboarding that is kind of today's lesson. And so do you guys have any questions about that?
I was waiting for Jason to ask.
Glenn?
If he's not going to ask, then I'll ask. So I know you covered this, maybe it was Wednesday, but for sure yesterday. You talked about getting to know them as a person, find out their likes and dislikes and so on. I get that. I'm just wondering if I'm looking at 5 different people, do I really do that with 5 different people, or do I wait for do I do that during the interview, or do I wait for onboarding to get to know them better?
Great question. I think that it's really important in the interview process to get to know them, to see if you guys click together and to see if your communication styles align. You don't necessarily have to get into like the nitty gritty about who they are as a person until the onboarding, because that's more when you're building the relationship. Initially, you're just kind of understanding who they are, and what they like to do outside of work might actually imply whether or not they like work all of the time and are going to end up being burnt out, or whether they have a bunch of other clients, or just different things. And then also what you have in common, which will help them click with you as well. And so I think it's important in the interview process, but it's definitely more important in the onboarding process.
Okay, that's good.
That's a good question, though, yeah, because I think that you could spend a lot of time trying to get to know 5 different candidates.
And I really didn't want to do that, is what I was thinking. Yeah. So if I just do some cursory stuff and then save the more detailed stuff for the actual onboarding. Okay.
Yeah, and a nice little gut check for that. And like I said, I have done quite a wide array of interview tactics, including literally like coloring with the new interviewee, and just like that's a good way to help them calm down, and then also just to like have us be on the same level. But obviously it's not likely something you can do virtually. Maybe.
Okay. I did like your emphasis on getting clear, and my tasks keep getting clearer and clearer as I go through them. So this is awesome.
I think that's like a huge thing that gets overlooked when somebody's going to hire a virtual assistant, is that they just think, I have so much on my plate, I need somebody to take some things off. And it's not clear what exactly they need them to take off their plate and what skill sets are needed for that task. And then also it's not clear exactly how you're going to break it down and what you're going to hand off to them initially. So the more clear you can get, the better, for sure.
Well, what I'm thinking is I take for granted that people will understand what I say by copying and pasting, and you're going to copy these fields from here and you're going to paste them over here and create these lists. But if you're not a person who's very familiar with those terms or that does that on a regular basis, then yes, there's no clarity. So it's good that we hear that.
Well, and now you're using your money and your time. And so you're really wanting to invest more in the initial clarification of any process that you can create is going to save you money if they don't have to keep asking you questions about it, or if they do it wrong, then it usually falls on it not being explained properly.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
might as well not waste your time and money.
Yes.
So when you're at this point, and you're sending tasks or setting up a small project, you mentioned in the video, essentially repeating back or those types of things. Are those all necessarily going to be virtual conversations or phone conversations? Or at that point, is there the opportunity to hand off to email and say, okay, we're going to primarily go back and forth by email? Thoughts?
Yeah. It's whatever works for you. So I told Glenn yesterday that I do a daily check-in call with one of my clients. And I also recommend a weekly check-in call with your VA, even if you do like primarily email communication or Slack communication or whatever. I do recommend doing one phone or video call a week just to see, what did you do last week? What are you doing this week? What are you stuck on? And it's kind of just more personal, but you can definitely move the breakdown of the tasks to email, but make sure that you still build in those check-ins like throughout the task via email or whatever, and expectations for how long it should take them to respond to your emails, and make sure that you're building in whether or not they need to reiterate what you just explained to them. Just make sure that that communication is even more clear in the email and even more broken down, because you don't get the opportunity as like a quick back and forth. It's more like, now you're waiting on a response. So make sure that you're really clear so that it's not wasting your time and your money. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Does that make sense? Man, this might be an easy day, huh?
Well, I don't have a lot of questions. I think I asked them all already.
Melissa, do you have anything?
Yeah, I have questions, and it might be more specific to my situation, but I guess, so I feel like I need potentially two different types of people. Mm-hmm. So I wrote in the email that I'm actually working on a potential trade with a VA agency, and so I'm excited to kind of test the waters with getting just some of my to-do list taken care of. But I feel like the biggest thing that I need in my company is like a task master, like a task manager type person, to where I can lay out my to-do list, my quarter goals, my year goals, my weekly goals, and they can help keep me on track. So like almost more of what I might consider, if they were to be two different roles, an executive assistant versus just a VA checking my emails, like someone that has a little bit more buy-in. Like they don't have to be the COO of the company, but they are, like I guess that would be their special skill set, is that kind of time management, like I kind of want them, like this sounds like a bad term, or like I don't know how to run my business, but almost like a babysitter, like for them to check in and be like, okay, now remember, like this week you need to focus on this.
You're an entrepreneur.
Same.
Yeah.
So I guess like I don't know that I will get that from the agency that I'm going to be working with, and so I guess that's where I still feel like I need someone that works more like you. And is that like, from your perspective as a VA, is that putting too much on you, or like are there VAs out there who specialize in that kind of role, and the best way to find them?
Yeah, I would think that you would more likely be looking for a project manager. Okay. So that's kind of the role that I'm seeing, like you talk about, and you could have a virtual project manager. And there are a lot of agencies that we've recommended on the list that have people that specialize in that. I don't know what that price range would be. Probably around $20 an hour, I would assume. I'm not sure if like the international agencies do that, but if you build out processes, or even hire somebody initially to help you build out processes, so that
that's what I want.
Board. Yeah. And
they're going to write the processes, and I'm going to approve them.
And so if you even do that initially, and then like invest in that initially, and then onboard somebody else to run those processes, if that makes sense. So like building the processes, that's kind of like So honestly, my role within Jamie's company has evolved. And so I do everybody's job before they do that. And I just like, cause I'm such an entrepreneur, I just want to like think of all the fun projects, and then like I can identify the tasks within them, but then I get really bored and I want to start a new project. So I just like offload that to the new person that I train and onboard. And so like you can have somebody that comes in as a project manager and keeps track of everybody's deadlines and tasks, but also helps like facilitate creating processes within that role and within each project. So I would say that you want somebody that specializes in that instead of somebody that's just serving the coffee, right? Instead of somebody that's like, $6 to $14 an hour, that's just literally needs like clear communication and clear walkthrough, and you to have that initially before you even hire them. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
I think so. And those positions, like you said, some of these agencies have them.
Yeah.
Because I'm really leery right now at this stage in my business to hire a W-2. Like I feel much more comfortable with 1099 just with the cash flow
and
situation.
You can do that for sure.
Okay.
I mean, I would say that a lot of the project managers I've worked with are independent contractors that work with multiple companies, or that at least are 1099 and work with one person. Where I would say you would get a little weary with that is that just make sure that you're not their sole client. And I've kind of discussed this a little bit, but they can like claim that you're an employer. So that's just something to be cautious of. But like I said, yes, there are agencies. And while we were doing the research, we did find people that specialize. And so they gave us like a list of different positions or roles that they can fill within that company, that they just will either find somebody and outsource that person to you, or they already have it under their umbrella like company.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So I would just submit inquiries and include that.
Okay, awesome. I think I just clicked on Belay because the name was Belay. And I think they had project management as like a side thing, and they're local to Atlanta, and I think I know people who know them. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, if you do, you should let us know, and so that we could interview them or something fun.
And I have one. I'm curious if the company that I'm actually talking to, if you had heard of them. They're called Vava Virtual Assistants.
I don't think I have. Have you, Megan? Did you see that in your research?
So that's who I'm talking with right now. And I've gotten to know the two ladies that own the company. They're amazing. And so their assistants are all virtual, but they are local to Atlanta. So I've had plenty of time with them to where like they've gained my trust, and I feel really comfortable hiring them. So
let me know, like maybe send me like a contact and email, because we're always looking for more people to like teach us about their virtual assistant companies. And I'm going to mention this at the end, but there's like bonuses coming your way if you fill out feedback form. And one of those bonuses is me interviewing the CEO of FreeUp. And then another one is me interviewing the CEO of another agency that does like Canadian, she's a Canadian agency that does a bunch of different virtual assistants and different things. So like, I love doing that and like interviewing them because they're way more knowledgeable about that agency side, and I'm just like an individual. So we love doing that. So that's really cool.
Yeah. I'm sure they'd love to talk to you. They're pretty cool. I know. And I was listening to the last Q&A, you were talking about billing. Like one of the things that they're really proud of is they bill to the 6 minute. And so like you're like I know that like based on the list, they're probably a little bit more expensive than a lot of the options on the list. But then like the way that they keep track of that billing is like they're super efficient. And so,
and we actually have that list actually expands too. So we do have more research than that, but we were like, we don't want to overwhelm people. We'll give them top 10. But we might even have the option in the future to expand that list to like top 20. And so that you can just scroll through and like choose the 5 that best fit your needs or whatever, but maybe more options. But we don't want to like, you can find a lot of options on the internet. Like, so we don't want to overwhelm that. But I like that idea because we definitely focused a lot on more affordable virtual assistants, because a lot of our target demographic, they're looking for just the initial hire, which is usually more affordable. And then as they expand, they might have somebody that specializes in something. Yeah. I think that's cool though.
To follow up on that question, like kind of just because I have this trade coming, I definitely like, I want to do work for this company anyway. Cause I think just getting in front of their clients would be beneficial.
And Melissa is a photographer.
Yes. So, but kind of what I'm thinking is maybe start with them and just offload email, offload social media posting, just like the basic, generic, non-creative, non-managerial tasks. And then I could, like, already having that relationship, potentially bring on a project manager later that then could, like, I guess it's a little bit backwards. Like, what would you?
Honestly,
that's okay, or would you recommend doing something else?
I actually recommend doing that because I believe that if you can find even just a few things on your plate that are taking a lot of your time and that are splitting your creativity and splitting your day a lot of times, so that now you're focusing on email and it's kind of ruined the rest of your day for productivity, I would recommend offloading that, especially if actually it's easy to delegate, because you're able to easily break that down. And even like if they have questions about how to answer something, you can easily like answer that one question versus answering 13 questions that are in your inbox, so like you're able to just kind of really easily outsource that. And that's a really good way to dip your toe in the water with your first hire, while also freeing up your time to focus on like bigger vision items. Like that's a perfect serve the coffee example, like while you're flying the plane. And you can hire, like Megan pointed out at the first call, you can hire somebody that is the like flight attendant lead or supervisor, maybe, I don't know what the terminology is. You can hire that later once you have like freed up some of your time to even train that person or to identify what tasks now are taking up like the next priority. That makes sense. I actually really like that idea. And I think it'll make you more comfortable with your next hire. And also, if you follow this process, it's going to make your next hire way easy anyway.
It seems like it'll be practice on stuff that maybe it's okay if more of it falls through, like email. Like I can always go in and just make sure that's getting done. And then I'll have the practice of working with that person and onboarding them. And then when I bring on someone that I'm actually relying a little bit more heavily on.
And we talk a lot about the perfect practice project and like you creating the perfect practice project, which is, it could be something that you have them do on a daily basis. It could be something that's just like you make up to see what their skill sets are. But we really recommend that you start them as like their first task is something that would be the perfect practice project. That would be built-in check-ins to make sure that they're completing things. And even yesterday you listened to the Q&A call, like building in a way to check on the invoice and break down like how much time they spent on each thing. Even just for the first one or for the first 3 weeks or something, but like building that within the perfect practice project and like making sure that everything else can be just handed off very smoothly. Like we always emphasize that and paying them for that time, obviously. Yeah. Cool. Great question.
One more question if nobody else has one, but anybody else? I just kind of thinking ahead, communication, you mentioned Slack. I'm familiar with Slack. I probably would enjoy using Slack, but I'm thinking, okay, I've also been like on the virtual side of receiving instruction via Slack. And so I know like what a headache that can be to get dings every 15 random minutes or whatever. What would you all recommend as being on that side, on the receiving end of those notifications, as far as a good process of communication and good practices for me to implement as like the founder instead of the one working? Because I've been on the other side where I've been receiving the instruction via Slack, and for me it's very overwhelming eventually. But I know also it's like a great tool for communication. So
I actually recommend using Slack and using a project management software like Monday or Asana or Trello, and keeping the communication that's relevant to the project and to the task on that project management software, and then keeping miscellaneous discussions and different things like brainstorming or something on Slack, or just like quick, like, hey, I need you to check Trello. Hey, I added a project to Trello. Like those kind of things on Slack. Like we use it all the time for like, hey, are you going to be able to jump on this Q&A call? Hey, I'm running late. Like no big deal. That's all on Slack. And you can make sure to, and this is something that I don't think I emphasized enough, but create boundaries for them and with them so that you're not overstepping and making them exhausted with the overwhelm of notifications, but also so that they know when you're available and how to communicate with you and when to do that. And so I think that something that a lot of my clients have found really useful is for me to say exactly when I'm available and how, like where it will be. Like I'll be on Slack and I'll be on Monday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm not available Thursday through Sunday. Like those are something that I communicate clearly. Like I have to communicate it right when I'm taking on a new client, but also like I have to reiterate that. And like there might be times where you're like, hey, we're going to be really heavy this week on tasks. Like communicate that really clearly. But again, task management software it's huge.
Yeah.
Like it's really beneficial to pick one and even just if you have them use that task management software, or if you have that be their first task is like researching one, make sure that you set parameters for how long it should take and all different things and your price points. Be really clear about it. But maybe that's something that you have them identify as like what works well for communication for your specific needs and for your team and for your price point, and then use the task management software for that task management communication. I think that works best, but if anybody has any other advice or any other experience with it, I think you guys should share that.
No, I would agree with that. I would just, I mean, I think it's probably in the back of all of your minds, but I like to say things and not assume. Documentation of those things in a place that's, I mean, essentially what Summer said was a trickle down funnel effect of your communication, but there needs to be that, along with that is where those processes live and that they're easily accessible and that people can refer to them very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Slack has gotten a lot more robust lately, which has, and I can speak from experience, it has caused people to not know how to use, it's kind of like driving a Ferrari now. There's a lot of stuff you can do in Slack, so you have to be careful that if you're going to do it, everybody understands all components of it. So it's, just keep that in mind, knowing who you're working with, whether they have good knowledge of it or whether they're like, yeah, I've used Slack before. You used it 3 years ago. It's very different than it is today.
I even record like an SOP about where things live in Slack. So like when I even introduced Megan to my processes, I was like, here is how I use Slack and here's how to post GIFs, which is very important in our company culture. And like, here's how you can remind yourself of a notification later, because I find this to be a really useful feature. And we don't post everything. Yes. And we don't post everything in our communication back and forth. We post it, if it's research, you post it in the research channel. But now we've kind of moved over to Basecamp where we're using that. But that's definitely like a really good example is like, or example of a process you should explain is don't assume they know how to use it the same way that you do. Like if you can create a really short, like 6-minute video on how you use Slack, that would be really useful for them to just watch and then be able to jump right in.
I think when I started using Slack, the remind notifications was not a feature. I didn't know it was a new feature. Maybe it was all along, but that was like the death of me because I had so many people contacting me on different teams and like stuff would just get lost.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Because we didn't have, they only started, go ahead, what?
Do you know about the remind feature?
Well, you just said it, so I know about it now. I will find it.
Yeah. You just click the, like any message, you click the 3 dots. And you do remind me about this in 20 minutes, 1 hour, 3 hours next week or tomorrow. It's so handy.
I love that.
So the point of that being,
it'll remind you of that message again. It'll say like, hey, you asked me to remind you of this message that you're supposed to send flowers.
Even though you've read it, it's kind of like, I can't deal with this right now, but I don't want to get back.
Yeah, remind me next week.
Stuff would get lost so much easier than like an email. Like if it comes through an email, you can mark it as unread, you can star it, whatever, but like a really important message from the CEO of the company in a random channel that was directed to you, and then there's 20 other comments below it, is just a headache.
You can star it and you can pin it in Slack too, and then you can look through all the things that you've starred and all the things that you've pinned. Like I am like very familiar with Slack now because not only have I used it for a while, but I've also taught people how to use it, and through teaching people how to use it, I'm like, oh wait, I didn't even. Okay, when you press like the slash and you try to press Giphy, which is something that I do all the time, you can actually collapse all of the things in the thing. Like there's like all of these different commands, and I started like reading through them as I'm explaining it on the video. So like that can be really useful for you, but it can also be really useful for your new assistant.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would elaborate on, which has been touched on, if you're not used to working with teams or a remote culture or a VA type person, it is your responsibility to set boundaries and follow up on them, even though you may say them up front. Let me use an example. So for instance, I work with a design studio out in Seattle, and I've been attempting to help them create a remote culture because I'm their first remote worker. So therefore I was looking at, okay, the biggest problem is expectations. Are they expecting me to do these 5 things? And if they're not saying it out loud, am I supposed to be the one to bring it up to them? Are they supposed to bring it up to me because they're technically project managing me? And then there's this bubble of potential nobody's talking to each other, and it's really hard to avoid that. So therefore you have to be very vigilant that communication is like, this is good communication, but we're going to go here for like a month. And then we'll let off of that and make sure. I think that Summer, you spoke to this idea in the recent video, set all that stuff up right away, repeat it, and then say, we're doing this just to cover both of our bases. We're going way above both of our brains here, and then we'll back off just so that we don't miss anything. It sounds silly to beat that into the ground so much almost, but I find being a remote worker, a lot of times they feel as though they're communicating with me, but when in reality they're actually not. Therefore, I'm in a weird position being subservient to them, but yet saying, hey guys, what's going on? So that's why I say it's really the role of the hiring to say, to really step that up a little bit.
Yeah, I think that that's a huge thing. Like what I said in the video, like you cannot over communicate or oversimplify this. Like I really try to emphasize that as much as possible. Like Megan's like, do we need to include it on this page if we include it in the instructions? And I'm like, yes, like over communicate it, because like that's such an important thing, especially when first establishing the relationship is like, we need to be very clear about what the expectations are, but also like, I want you to be very clear with me about what you understand the expectations to be. And if you can break everything down as much as possible, then you'll see, oh, I didn't even communicate this step, or, oh, that's actually not the most efficient way to do it. Like there's a lot of bonuses to over communicating, like, and as long as it's not like crossing boundaries, like if, Jason was available only Monday through Thursday, and then on Friday they're like, hey, we have a mandatory meeting. He's like, no, like I just told you I'm not available on Fridays, like without overstepping the boundaries and expecting them to respond at certain times. Like you need to establish that and then communicate it as much as possible. If that makes sense. Cool. Anything else? Do you have anything to add, Megan?
You guys were talking a little bit about project management software, and Summer touched a little bit about us transitioning over to Basecamp. And I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that, because for me, Melissa, you were talking about like the overwhelm of being on the receiving end of Slack. And before we had started using Slack and Trello, and it just seemed on the receiving end, it seemed like everything was just kind of like hard for me to follow. And one of the benefits of Basecamp that I personally like is that you can have different teams and different areas for that communication. So you can have one section of Basecamp for all of your documentation and all of your company policies and procedures and things like that. And then you can have different teams for specific projects that you're working on. And within each of those projects, there's a little chat feature. So you can keep the chats within that specific project or within that specific team. And then there's also message boards as well. So it's less of like an immediate response. And the message boards are just kind of like, hey, here's an idea. Let's discuss this later. Or
and that differs from, say, like Asana, where the conversation lives in the task. And so like what's nice about Basecamp is that the conversation lives in the project. So you're like, hey, I'm referring to this project, and like you can talk. I think, can you post in the task itself too?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And so like, but I really like the project element. But that being said, you can start with something really simple and free like Trello and see what works for you. Like that's what we did. We started with Trello. I've worked on Monday. I've worked on Asana. I've worked on Basecamp. I've worked on Trello. Like I've worked on all these different ones, and it really just depends on what the client likes. But at the same time, it's like what works for you. And so just start with something that can help you manage where everything is and where everything lives and where the communication lives and where the files live. That can set you up for long-term success. Like that can set you up for being organized long-term, which can be difficult, especially now that you're growing your team potentially for the first time. Excellent. Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, man, that's the end of the week. For anybody watching this video later, congratulations, you have made it now through day 5 and the Q&A. And for you guys, thank you for joining us. We will be sending you a bonus for any feedback that you have over the course. Thank you for contributing so much to our beta launch. And we hope that it's been really, really helpful for helping you get clear about what you need in a virtual assistant and for helping you get clear about how to hire one and what happens next. So thanks so much, guys. We'll see you around.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good luck, everybody.